Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Matt Garvey and we are here to talk about making comics today. And it's Thursday, which means it's time for another indie comic critique. And we have been incredibly fortunate to have been sent Robo by its writer Jesse Keppler. Jesse, thank you so much for sending this over. I really did enjoy it. You've asked me to have a look, give it a critical review as if I was an editor, and pick up anything that where I think you may be able to improve the book, especially in subsequent issues, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. But also, if you are a comic creator out there and you'd like me to do something similar for your book, make sure you send a PDF copy to info@garveycomics.com. There'll be a link in the description, and I'll do the exact same for you as I'm doing for Jesse and his team. And with that in mind, let's give Jesse's team a big shout out, shall we? So as I mentioned, you've got Jesse Keppler on writing duties for this book. You've also got Philip Appleby on who was the artist in this book, and you've got letters by Marco Della Verde, and you've also got cover colours by Amanda Appleby, and you've got logo by Winston Gambro, which we'll get onto in a minute because I really do like that logo, and you've got a special thank you to Benjamin Harnett as well. So guys, as always, this is a critical review, but I promise you this is coming from a place of love. So any pointers that I do point out, all it's meant to do is to give you some encouragement and push you in the right direction to become a better creator, because we all start somewhere, and there's certain things that you may not know when you first start going out there making comics that you're not going to know until someone shows you, or if someone comes in with fresh eyes. And that's exactly what this critique is going to do for you guys today. So as always, we are going to start with the cover and work our way in. We're going to look at the cover, then we're going to look at the art, then we're going to look at the letters, and then we're going to look at the writing at the end. And also, if there are any spoilers, I will put chapters below, so hopefully you can avoid those spoilers if you don't want to know what happens in the comic. But I'm going to try and not spoil too much. But let's start with the cover, shall we? Winston, I am loving this logo. Very Iron Man, very short circuit board kind of motif that you've got going. It's big, it's bold. You would definitely be able to see that logo on a comic book shelf. So thumbs up to you, sir. Always a win in my book. Philip, with regards to the actual artwork of the cover, I'm liking the dynamic pose of your character. I think it's very, very striking. I do think, though, less is more with regards to everything else that you've got in the background. I understand, obviously, this character is a hero to the people, so obviously you've got loads of faces in the crowd, that kind of thing. But I think with the cityscape, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, I think it is a little bit too sketchy to be on the front cover. I would probably simplify that and maybe, fewer buildings, but more clear, if that makes sense. But overall, as a cover, I think it works really, really well. But as always, I am going to throw my black layer on, and we're going to have a look at the contrast and see if, we can, see if it pops off the screen. So as always, I'm going to put my black layer. Yep, your main character is popping off. That's fine. The logo is standing out from the background. That's good. The one issue that I do have with the cover, and Amanda, I'm really sorry, buddy, this is coming at you. The colours that you've chosen are way too dark for this cover. There is a video that I'm going to link in the description about muddy colours and about, using colours with too much K in them. I think it's really, really worth seeing it. And I'm not picking on you, I promise, because these are all mistakes that we all make, myself especially, because I'm a trainee colourist. But, if I take my pipette here and I zoom in, if I start, color picking some of the colors that you've got here, they're very, very dark. And what it is, you don't want to pick colors in the bottom third of that color picker bar, because these are going to print really, really bad when it comes to, going out and printing. So I would, if I was you, go back and maybe lighten them. It's really hard for me to do this without the originals, but, just something to try and lighten it up a little bit, and it's just going to make it pop off the the cover a little bit more. Even then, it's still way too dark, but at least it does brighten up the colors just a little bit, because at the moment, they are a little bit too muddy. So that's me with the tweaks. That's your original tweaks, original, and with the black layer on, that's yours, that's mine. So yeah, I would go back and I would probably have a look at the color scheme that you're using. And again, don't pick any colors that are below that bottom third of the color picker, because it's not going to print well. You're going to get muddy colours. Okay, so let's jump into the interior art. And Philip, I am absolutely loving your art style, sir. I think you are a fantastic artist. I think you are well on the way to becoming a massive superstar in the world of comic art. The problem I've got with your book, guys, and this is for the whole team, so Jesse, make sure you're listening to this as well, is the fact that this book isn't coloured is actually hurting your comic. And what I mean by this is, Philip, your style is very sketchy. and I do not have a problem with that. But because you haven't brought a colorist in to do some of those finishing touches, not just with the actual colors, but just the way the line work is treated, it makes your comic look like it's not been complete. And what I mean by this is, if you'd have told me that this comic was a, director's cut variant, because if you watch this channel, I love a director's cut. I love the comics where it shows, how the sausage was made, that kind of thing, so I can see all the details. But the problem you've got is because you guys haven't got someone to, come in and do those little final tweaks, your art looks a little bit unfinished. And what I mean by this is, so if I go to one of the pages, and I'm not going to spoil this splash page for yourselves, not yet anyway, we're going to talk about that later, but as you can see, you've got some, you've got your main character in shadow, and we can see your lines, where you filled in your inks, that kind of thing. And again, if this was, a director's cut or a making of book, wouldn't have a problem with that. But because you haven't brought a colorist in, to me, it kind of looks like it's unfinished. So what I would have done is, before, you go to print or, you put this through the next stages, I would do a little, either a threshold adjustment or a levels adjustment. And what that would do is that's going to take your sketchy, and I mean that in a nice way, your sketchy art style, and it's just going to thicken up those lines a little bit more. So it's going to take those black areas from all the strokes back and forth and make them nice, rich blacks. So it's going to look a lot better with regards to, when it's printed. Otherwise, it's going to look like it's a sketchbook. So again, that's your original, and that's with a tiny levels adjustment. And literally all you need to do, in Photoshop, come down to the mask area and go to levels, and literally just play around with the sliders just to darken up the line art just a little bit. It's just going to make it look a lot more professional. Also, one of the other things that bring in either a colorist or someone to do some tones on the actual artwork itself would help, not just with the thresholding, but to add more of a third dimension to your artwork, because there's no shadows, buddy. There's very little in the way of, definition on your main characters. And I think that's something that he needs, especially because this is a dystopian book set in the future. And if you're not going to have a colorist, bringing, that world to life, which you don't have to, you could at least get someone like a Walking Dead kind of style, to put some basic shadows into the book, just so your characters look a bit more defined and make them, separate them from the backgrounds, so get someone to come in and do either some light shadow work and some color holds to to push the backgrounds back. Just for an example, again, I'm doing this on your artwork and making it look absolutely horrible, but apologies. But even something as basic as this, it just makes the characters look a little bit more defined and just makes them set them off from the background a little bit. I think that's going to level the overall aesthetics of the book up to that next level, because as it is, as I said, and I don't mean this in a horrible way, it looks a little bit incomplete, and I think it just needs those little finishing touches to bring it up to that next level. Okay, Marco, so let's talk about your letters. Overall, I think you've done a wonderful job with the letters. I like the asymmetrical robot balloons, that kind of thing. I think they work really, really well. One thing that I probably would look at is I think you need to be careful with regards to your balloon placement of your dialogue. And this probably falls on Jesse's shoulders as much as anyone, because you've got a lot of dialogue in there, buddy, which we're going to talk about later. But, this page is a great example that, you've got this very small balloon and you've got a lot of dialogue there to, try and fit in. If I was the letterer, I would probably go back and speak to the writer and go, would you mind if I move all of this dialogue from the first balloon into the second balloon? So as you can see, I'm going to zoom in so you can see the guys can see this a little bit more. You've got all this dialogue that's kind of coming out of this tiny little balloon in the top left hand corner, and it's covering up a lot of the art. So you're covering up the machine that's taking the main character out of his mecha suit, that kind of thing. What I would probably do is I would move those balloons to below that panel and have the towel still going to the characters that are speaking, because the characters are there, but that way you're going to avoid covering up all of this art that's there. So again, I know you've been working with what you've been given, but that's something that I would potentially look at, with regards to the actual balloon placements. But apart from that, I think the letters are actually really, really good. Couldn't spot any mistakes, going through it 3 times. I thought it was very, very good. I think you're a wonderful letterer. Okay, Jesse, so let's talk about your writing now. This is probably where we're going to get into some spoilers, so I will put a chapter mark if you want to miss this, what we're going to talk about. But Jesse, again, really enjoyed your story. I thought it was really, really good. I like where it's going. Do have some issues though, buddy, which we're going to talk about one by one. Now, one of your biggest problems you've got is you are trying to cram way too much in a small space. Now, what I mean by this is you have a 20-page comic and you're trying to cram 24 pages worth of content into there. This should have really been a 24-page book. Now, as you can see, I've broken all the scenes down on the screen. So you've got some 3-page scenes, some 3-page scenes, some 2-page scenes, some 1.5-page scenes. Even that last big scene, that big reveal, that big twist of what actually happens at the end, you've only given it half a page. That should have been at least a page on its own. Whether you had, the page before where, the drone wakes up, that should have been the bottom of the second and last page. And then the reveal on the last page turn of page 24 of the drone waking up, that should have been it. Or put all that on its own separate page, because you've crammed it too much in it and it kind of loses its impact. And this is the same with regards to your dialogue. Now, you have tried to put way too much dialogue into 2 smaller panels, which I'm going to show in a second. Now, what I would advise you to do in the future is, in between getting your artwork back from the artist and before you send it on to your letterer, is rewrite your dialogue. That's what I always do, and that's one of the reasons why I taught myself how to letter, is because once I get that artwork back, I will look at the artwork and I will rewrite, because maybe the artist has given me not enough space or given me too much space, so I can write more dialogue. It's your responsibility to look at those art pages and go, okay, that's not going to fit, that's going to cover up too much art. I need to rework that. I need to rework the scene sometimes, to get those points across and put, a little bit less dialogue in it. So what I mean by this is this panel right here. Now, you've got 2 characters speaking in close proximity, and within that, you've got 4 individual bubbles. That is way too many bubbles for such a small panel. Now, what you need to do is you either need to rewrite that dialogue, or you need to, speak to the letterer and rewrite the script to, break that panel border. And instead of it going there, perhaps use some of this area up here to place it and, just break that border a little bit, just so you're not covering up too much art. Me personally, what I would have done is, once the artwork came back from Philip, is I would have spoke to Philip and said, Philip, can we do some, Photoshop jiggery pokery and maybe flip the top panel over? Because what that would allow you to do is you can actually put, the top 2 bubbles from that second panel into the top panel, and it would allow you to put the ones that I've put in blue up to the top of that panel, and it's going to free up all of that space. And it's not going to affect the story too much with regards to the hole you've got. And it's just going to give you a place to put more dialogue. So this is what you kind of need to think about when, not only when you're the writer, but when you're the project manager of book. Too much dialogue is going to hurt it. You're going to cover up too much art, and that's not what you want to do. And again, this is another example. You've got these 2 panels. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individual bubbles in one panel. That's way too many. Now, I know you don't want to cover up all these faces that you've got on the page. I get that. But if you need to, you're going to have to rewrite that dialogue, or you're going to have to break that panel border and cover up some of these faces. It's a pain in the bum, I know, but at the moment, you're covering up way too much of what's going on. And, seeing these characters' faces actually in the panel is probably more important than losing maybe 1 or 2 of the faces that are, outside the panel. Okay, so a different example of your dialogue is this panel I want to show, where you've got Barton, shouting at your main character and throwing his helmet through a plate glass window. Now, what you've got here is you've got 2 different actions actually happening in the one panel. What you've got here is you've got Barton actually shouting and then talking it in a different tone in the same panel. So what needs to have happened here is, as he's shouting and throwing the helmet, that's one panel. And then when he's speaking, that should have been its own panel. So this is what I mean when regards to, you need to go look at your plotting and looking what is actually happening in those scenes, and then breaking those down into panels and go, okay, well, that needs to be its own panel. That needs to be its own panel. Or that can be put into 2, because this is a case of where it needs to be 2 rather than 1. But as I said, buddy, I really did enjoy the comic. But the biggest problem you've got is you're doing something, for a lack of a better term, you're doing something called exposition dumping. Now, if you know what exposition is, I'm not trying to teach you how to suck eggs, but, some people may be watching this and may not know what exposition is. Now, exposition is information that the reader or the audience is given, usually at the same time as the protagonist. And what it does is it creates conflict, it creates drama, and it helps push the narrative forward. Now, in the case of Robo, what you're doing, and I'm going to spoil something in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is you are giving information away too easy, and it kind of loses its impact. So, for example, in your book, you reveal very early on that your main protagonist is not the original Robo. That's a valuable piece of information that, should have been used for shock value to make the audience go, oh, I didn't say that coming, but it's treated like such a throwaway piece of information. It's kind of losing its importance, because not only do you mention it in the character's narration very early on, you kind of mention it. Well, you not kind of mention, you do mention it, 2 or 3 pages later when the main character is having a drink with Syed again. It's just given away. What you should have done is you should have used that information in the argument where your protagonist is having with Barton, and Barton should have thrown it back in his face saying, you are not the original Robo, I can throw you back on the street where I found you, blah, blah, blah. Because what that would have done is not only would that have created conflict between the characters, it would have created drama, and it would have pushed the narrative forward and, give your character a bit more of a motivation to do what he's going to end up doing in subsequent issues. But because of what you've done and how you've done it, you've pretty much revealed, to me at least, who the original Robo is, because that person is in the story, and that's me really not trying to spoil your comic, buddy. So you kind of need to not feed your audience information, but sprinkle it at the right time and give it at the right moment where it's going to be most impactful, where it's going to service the story better. So hopefully you don't feel like I've beaten you up too much. Hopefully this has helped, and it's information that you can give in subsequent issues that you do. If you have enjoyed this, give us a like, share, and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. And remember, if I can make comics, anyone can. Take care.